Desiree, you and your co-writer Cecilia adapted this film from a novel by Emily Danforth. I'm curious as to how you found the book and how you guys made the decision to focus the film largely on basically the second half of Emily's novel.
Yeah, so I read the book when it first came out. A publisher friend sent it to me and thought I would like it, and I loved it. And I shared it with every woman in my life, and I'm trying to make it so gendered. I mean, every lesbian in my life, to be honest.
There we go.
And I shared it with my girlfriend at the time, who loved it too, and said, "You need to make this into a movie." And my instant thought was fear, because the book was so good and the tone was so pitch perfect. Mm-hmm. It danced beautifully between tragedy and comedy, and to me it was the first really honest depiction of teen life I'd read in a book, and it reminded me of the John Hughes film and the teen films I'd grown up on. And I was really intimidated by that task, because 80% of the work I had done consisted of mainly fart jokes. So I put it aside for a while, and then I made my first feature film, which was super low budget and put together with spit and good intentions. Right. And favors from friends. And then I when I was traveling on the festival circuit with that film, my producing partner said, "What do you want to do next?" And I was like, "Okay, not next. This is a book, read it, love it, and then in 10 years, let's earn the right to make it." And she read it and she said, "We're doing this." Wow. And got the rights, and we wrote it on spec.
I mean, I can only imagine how hard it must be just in general to distill a novel into a 90-minute film.
Yeah, you asked about
that. Is that how
I
you
forgot to
decided
answer.
to kind of just look at the second half of the book?
Yeah, no, from the get-go, I knew I didn't want to focus on the whole book. I had no interest in telling. So the book's 500 pages long, and it starts when Cameron's 11. Oh. And it ends when she's 17. And the last 200 pages take place at God's Promise, the center she's sent to. I always knew I wanted to focus on that. Just the dramatic arc of it was so much more condensed. I hate biopics. I hate it when movies go and... Yeah, it just feels like a watered-down version of someone's whole life. I knew that I love The Queen in the way that was condensed. I wanted to make a very condensed narrative that focused on one very specific moment in this girl's life that was emblematic of what it was to be a teenager.
Chloe, would you have been ready to play age 11 had Desiree decided to do the book from start to finish?
I'm there. I can definitely pass for 11. I think for sure,
For each of you, what do you think it means to the film that it does take place 25 years ago? Obviously, it's pre-social media, which I think is really interesting. But how do you think that informs the film or changes the film that it's 1993 as opposed to 2013?
Well, for me, I just wanted to keep them as isolated as possible. The book takes place in 93, and it would have been more affordable for us to shoot it now, but at the end of the day, if they had any connection to the outside world or any idols, it would have changed the feeling. They're so alone. They have no idea of what life could look like as a functioning homosexual. And that was important to me. I grew up Iranian with conservative Iranian parents, and when I came out of the closet, it was like coming out as a freaking leprechaun. My parents were like, "What is that?" Right. Ahmadinejad, the president at the time, had just publicly announced that there were no gays in Iran.
I remember that.
Yeah, he went to Colombia and he was like, "That doesn't exist in my country. It's an ailment that's punishable by stoning to this day," and it was so unheard of. And that was the loneliness of coming out, of never having seen someone who looked like me, who was like me. And that was one of the elements of the book that I loved, that I related to so deeply. So to change it to today would have changed the meaning entirely.
And obviously, as an actor, you're doing different periods all the time, Chloe. But for you, what did you do to explore a time frame that, shockingly, you were not even alive 25 years ago?
We don't have to mention that.
Very mature 21.
Yes.
Well, I think more than just trying to grasp a time period, I found it very interesting the juxtaposition of where we were politically in America when we filmed this movie compared to the 1993 setting, and how when I signed on to this movie, we were living in Obama era still. It was a very different climate in America. I've always been an advocate for the LGBT community. So this was something that was very important to me. But in so many ways, we were championing a movie that didn't have the societal impact that it did halfway through the project when Donald Trump was elected. And all of a sudden, I realized that not only were we doing a beautiful piece that I think depicts being a young gay person for the first time very adequately, this is a societally impactful, rebellious movie. This is the highest form of activism that you could do. And the fact that it's 2018 and not much has changed.
When you think back to the filming, I mean, the cast is, you've got these Tony winners like Jennifer and John Gallagher. You have these people, relative newcomers like Forrest and Sasha. You've got Chloe. Chloe, when you think about to the filming, who kept you on your toes the most of your fellow cast members? Was there like a wild card?
I think it was the perfect example of an ensemble because we didn't have enough rehearsals to really know what we were going into. We just had to jump in, and we all did our rehearsals, the night before alone, and then we had a very finite amount of time in our day to shoot it. So there was an energy that was almost like being on stage with each other. And it was special because working with someone like Sasha, working with someone like Forrest, who are the same age as me, but I've acted for 15 years, and having their energy come in a lot of ways, it broke a self-awareness that I have just naturally from being very comfortable in front of the camera. It broke it down so they're not hitting their marks, and we're not doing things as strategically as they would be done if you're with a bunch of seasoned actors, which I think is really important. And it comes across very organic, and I think you can really feel that in the film. It's unconventional. And so I think that also goes for Ashley Connor and the way that she shot us. It was very unconventional. We didn't have a locked off shot. It wasn't, an establishing and then we go closer and closer and closer. It was, let's just turn over here and get this shot.
Yeah, it felt like everything was dictated by the tools in our arsenal. We were shooting at a very low budget with a very restricted amount of time with actors who, Chloe's done 60 films, Sasha's done 1, and she shot it in a van. Right. And she, when you tell her when you give her a specific instruction, she's like, come again? I mean, she's great. Like, she figured it out. And by the end, we were running like clockwork. But at the same time, it was such a discrepancy between all of us and our skill set, but also with our money and our time. So this is my favorite way to work, too, is sort of at the top of the day, see, like, all right, these are the pages we need to accomplish. These are the people around us, and these are the problems. We're missing these props. This weather problems happen. Like you just make a checklist of the problems, and you're like, what soup can I make with these ingredients? It's my favorite way of cooking as well. You're like, this is what's in the fridge. What am I gonna make? And that's what a lot of it lives in the close-up because Chloe's performance dictated that. Because Ashley's handheld is like butter, and she could maneuver it quite nicely. You see, and that's one thing I really love about directing is you're a bit of a conductor. You're like, ooh, okay. Your skill in art in my art department is like, oh, you do really good props, and I saw your Clinton Gore graphic. Great, let's use that. Everyone has something else that they can bring to the table, and you get to decide where the talent goes and when to bring it down.
Well, this is a movie I think is going to help a lot of people. So I congratulate both of you, Desiree and Chloe. Thank you so much for being here.